you check the children. You're a little mad sometimes.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes. That is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Hey everyone, welcome to the horror show. I'm Cecil Laird.
Robert the Wolfman.
And Jaime Fuego, yeah.
You know they give us a mic for a reason.
They can still hear me. They can still hear me.
Projection.
Yes.
And we're here to talk today about something that has become, it's always kind of been a hot button issue, but especially in the last few years. The whole idea of horror franchises, classic horror franchises, and the idea of a reboot versus a legacy sequel. And then there's some gray area in between with something that I like to call a rebequel. That was before Scream 5 came out and called it a requel. So I guess that is a shortened form of it. But that's where basically it is a legacy sequel that is intended to reboot the franchise for a new audience. So you end up having one or two or more cast members from the original series, but they are not the central main characters in most of these cases. So we thought it might be fun to have a little discussion about some of the horror franchises that have not gone down this road yet. Obviously, some of the more recent examples are Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills leading up to Halloween Ends. That obviously wiped out most of the Halloween continuity, except for movie number 1, even though they've already done that a couple of times in that continuity. So that obviously has been very successful, and so that's leading other people to try and do the same thing.
Texas Chainsaw.
Yes, yeah, Texas Chainsaw, trying to bring back the not same actress lead from the original movie, but completely wasting it, in my opinion. If you guys have seen the new Texas Chainsaw on Netflix, they did not Jamie Lee Curtis that one. That went a completely different way, and it was, in my opinion, a complete waste. So other ones that we've done, there's the most recent Leprechaun movie, was also technically a legacy sequel, even though it did not have Warwick Davis back in it. They did have a couple of the original actors return, or at least one of them.
I think it was the older brother, wasn't it?
It was the big guy, the sort of
The
in
farm
the movie,
guy.
the mentally slow character in the original film. Yes. So Halloween's been done, Leprechaun's been done, Texas Chainsaw's been done, Chucky is currently being done. Obviously, that is more of a legacy sequel situation. It's just done in series form now. So we're going to give our thoughts on some horror franchises, and then later on in the panel we're going to outsource to you guys, because I'd love to hear some other people's opinion. Anyone that wants to talk, I'd love to get your thoughts on the whole idea of reboot versus legacy sequel, if you have any strong opinions. But I'm going to go ahead and start off with my first one, and it's kind of a little bit of a cheat for me because I want to talk about Nightmare on Elm Street. I love Freddy, it's my favorite, and for those of you that don't know, I'm currently in pre-production on a fan film called Dylan's New Nightmare. It's a legacy sequel to Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and we are bringing Miko Hughes back to reprise his role as Dylan Porter, the kid from the movie. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and so I'm a bit of a biased person when it comes to the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, but obviously I'm making a fan film. I want to talk about what a actual studio would do, what the studio would do, or what they should do, and in my opinion, at this point, a legacy sequel in the Nightmare franchise is going to be tough. Robert Englund is getting on in his years, and he's said numerous times in recent years that he does not think it would be a good idea to do it again. He did it for the Goldbergs, one episode of the Goldbergs, and if any of you saw that, that did not look like the Robert Englund Freddy that all of us have grown to love. So I do believe that his time is done in the Nightmare world, as he does too. However, I still think that the original Nightmare story, the reboot in 2010 was not great. That's a perfect example of, that's the thing, cinema, especially horror cinema, they went the reboot route for so many properties for so many years in the 2000s, and they just constantly got, guys, this is a horror panel, so forgive the language, but they all got shit on, for most of them for very good reasons. However,
doing stuff.
But then once the legacy sequel started up, now that's the new trend, and people are getting away from reboots entirely and stuff like that. So, but personally, I think that Nightmare on Elm Street would be best suited for an HBO Max 10-episode series. And the reason I say that is because you could have the first 5 episodes set up your core group of characters. Every episode focuses on a different member of the friend group and how they are learning about Freddy in their dreams, and you get to have a different person be focused on, so a different style of dream in each of those episodes. By episode 5, they've all talked finally and kind of realized they're all up against the same thing, and then the back half is them trying to figure out a way to defeat Freddy. And of course you could have one episode in the back half of the season being the origin, as they find out what the origin of this killer in Springwood is. That would be the focus of that episode. And I just think giving it room to breathe and really allowing us to, key into certain characters rather than trying to make us care about everyone within 20 minutes before they all start dying. I personally think that would make a big difference, especially for the Nightmare franchise. And, as a lot of people know, the Nightmare movies are often really great because of the dream sequences, and you could really have a lot of fun with dream sequences in each of the episodes for each different character. So I went on a little bit longer than I anticipated, but so Nightmare on Elm Street for me. And guys, quick thoughts from each of you on that.
Quick thought. Well, at least for like the sequel stuff for the Freddy aspect, and I'm kind of gonna touch on this even when I get to mine. With at least Robert being up in age as he is, it's not necessarily like he couldn't play it, as long as it's just how they do it. So if you wanted certain Freddy stuff, I would say the CGI movie route. So sometimes, depending on how it's done, even like take with the Resident Evil movies, how they did those. You don't agree? You don't think they could do very well with the
I'm sure
animated
they could
Freddy
do
movie?
very well. It's just not.
As far as like a
I don't think that's what they should do.
No.
No. I mean, they could do that in addition to a live action
That's
thing.
true.
But
Well, I'm thinking that'd be one way to keep Robert as basically Freddy.
I see what you're saying.
So
Fair
if they
enough.
take that legacy route of doing that to keep Robert in, that would work a little bit better.
So as opposed to him going under the makeup.
Exactly.
Okay,
Because
I know you said that's what's trying to
he's
shitty
already
thing
said
about the
before,
process.
that's one reason why he doesn't want to come back and redo this role, is because all the hours in the makeup chair. Which is, I don't blame him.
Yeah.
Pardon?
I didn't hate the Jackie Earle Haley one, and I think if it had been a little bit more well received, they could have, because I thought he was great, and I did enjoy going back to Freddy being scary again. And there were some interesting ideas in that film where, what was it, sleep naps, or
Oh, micronaps.
Micronaps. That's
Sleep naps. That's what it was.
I don't know. I forget this terminology. We watch hundreds of horror movies a year, but yeah. So there were some intriguing ideas of an aspect of originality that they went about with that. As far as the 10-episode series, I don't think you would be able to coerce Robert to come back. However,
it would not be Robert.
it would be recasting. But I think if you got a really great script together, and it was more of that legacy retconning thing that we've seen so much of, and you had Heather coming back, maybe dump truck full of money on Robert's front yard, maybe he would be inclined to do it just one more time, and I think that could be badass. But and maybe use him as almost like they did with some of the Star Wars requel stuff, where they brought in a legacy person, but it was a torch passing sort of situation. And maybe you could do a feature with Robert, and then he is passing the torch along, almost like what was happening in Freddy's Dead with his daughter, So maybe that could be cool, I don't know. And you could pass it along to an HBO Max series after a theatrical kind of tie-in. So that's at least I think could be dope.
Well, but then you couldn't do the same characters if it's a legacy sequel. It couldn't be Nancy and her friends in the 10 episode. That's what I was thinking if we just redid Nancy and everything. The idea that I had for a legacy Nightmare, just really briefly, is he's a dream demon, right? And he's getting up in years, but who's to say how dream demons work? Maybe their time passes, and so the way I thought, it's not a really nice way to have it passed down, but it is a slasher movie, and so he's a dream demon. So what if he finds a particular girl that he likes when she sleeps, and he takes advantage of her when she's sleeping one night, whether by tricking her into thinking it's someone she loves that she's sleeping with in her dream or whatever. But you can bring a part of Freddy out of the dream with you. We've seen hats, we've seen sweater bits, so who's to say that his sperm wouldn't come out of the dream with her as well? So she wakes up and now she's pregnant and has Freddy's actual seed, who then, you go 18 years later and now there's something completely off about him, and he kind of becomes the new Freddy sort of situation. I thought that might be kind of an interesting way to do it. But so, Fuego, why don't you go ahead and go with your first one?
Okay, so first one for me is a franchise that, there's some people who claim there's 5 Phantasm movies. Nope, there are only 4 Phantasm movies in my estimation, because that last one was such a such a disappointment, and I love Reggie Bannister, and I thought he was okay, but the fact that Coscarelli had so much less of an involvement in that 5th installment, Phantasm is one of my absolute favorite franchises, and this would most definitely be a reboot approach in my estimation because of the fact that with Angus Scrimm gone, you obviously have to recast somebody as the Tall Man, and yet there's so much else in the mythology between your little smushed down like Ewok-looking dudes and various other just vile nastiness that you see throughout those entries, and so with a reboot film, I think Coscarelli would probably produce, but you would bring in some young up-and-comer, somebody else in the horror community. I'm sure like Jason Blum would probably want to handpick somebody and try to produce a Phantasm remake, reboot, whatever you want to classify it as, but you would have to be very distinctive with the tone, in my opinion, because it is a franchise that with 2 and 3 and stuff, it got a little goofier, whereas 1 and 4 were very dreamy and haunting and relatively devoid of humor. So I think you would have to really commit to if you were going to go down the territory of very serious and very dark and disturbing, or, do you kind of embrace more of that Army of Darkness, Evil Dead 2 sort of vibe that the second and the third film had, where it was kind of goofier and cheesier and, relied on some like dark humor and whatnot. So I would be down for either approach personally, because I love how haunting 1 and 4 are, and I love the silliness of 2 and 3 and how they were more action-centric and over the top and such. So, I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think reboot, works for this franchise?
Personally, I would say reboot. Just also too, I've only maybe seen the first 2.
Okay.
So I
2
really,
is my favorite.
I really
love
can't say much on the Phantasm. Although it's just one of those things. It's one of those properties where it's worthy enough for a reboot. It's not perfect.
Boy.
Yeah, it's fun, but it's not perfect, and it can definitely benefit with our effects that we have nowadays, and it would elevate that property so much higher than what it was.
Yeah.
I think reboot definitely, and I'm gonna say something that might get some looks here. I don't know how everyone here feels about this particular production company, but
Oh God.
I think that an A24 Phantasm reboot
A24 AFC
would
Midnight
actually
could
work
do it.
very, very well,
Yeah.
because that first one was a very slow-going horror movie with weird esoteric dream sequences and
They
craziness.
definitely make
and-
it pretty looking.
And not only that, but it can lead towards a crazy final act, just like X did, So it's not like A24 completely avoids craziness when it comes to horror. So I'm not a big fan of a lot of A24 movies, but I do feel like their style would actually fit really well for a Phantasm reboot.
Yeah, if they went for the more serious approach, like I was saying, would be option A. Option B, if they went for the more serious approach, an IFC Midnight or an A24, I think could really handle it well. And I didn't even think about the series possibility, but I think Phantasm could actually work as a reboot series, like a 6, 8, 10 episode sort of season kind of thing, and you develop the mythology of the Tall Man and his interdimensional, kind of capabilities and whatnot. I think you could sustain the series, and
I think it would take some retooling. I don't think you could just have like the 3 main characters and the Tall Man to
Oh, no.
last a whole
No.
series.
Yeah.
You'd have to beef it up a little bit with more characters somehow, change the tale sort of.
Yeah, and maybe an A. Michael Baldwin and a Reggie Bannister cameo, but not playing those original characters. Have them in just more of a little Easter egg kind of situation.
Have Reggie be like a gun shop owner that sells the
Yeah.
4-barrel shotgun to the new guy or something like that.
Yeah,
That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, just strike the 5th one from the record, for God's sake. I hated it so much. Ugh.
All right, so Robert, what is the franchise that you would either reboot or give a legacy sequel to?
All right. Well, basically, at least I chose Evil Dead on this one. And granted, we are getting I would say a sequel with what's coming out with Evil Dead Rise. And technically, we did already kind of have a reboot with, was it the 2010? 2013. But
I've grown to like that one, man.
Everyone, a lot of people really like that one, including myself. I think it's great.
60-40. So, no, so there was a lot of things actually I appreciated that they did with the 2013 remake of Evil Dead, especially updating and making the Deadites far more brutal than what they were in the originals. My only issue that I had with that one is they retconned so much the original lore, especially with the Necronomicon and the possession of the spirits and the Deadites. I'm sorry, but if you get possessed by a Deadite, you not get buried and then unburied and all of a sudden you're human again. Fuck out of here with that.
Jane Levy was so good at that.
Yeah, no, okay, and even then, too, like with the embodiment of the evil in the woods, why couldn't you keep that as an actual demon? You had to have a naked bloody dead chick crawl up out of the ground. Those changes were some of my biggest issues with that, and I felt that's where it failed the most with the reboot aspect, especially with the changing of the lore. Other than that, I thought they did a damn fine job, especially with the upgrade of the graphics and things like that. Bruce has already said he's not coming back as Ash again after the series and stuff.
He's just doing like video games now, right?
Well, exactly.
From
He's already said, he's already said that he'll always be doing the voice for any of the games or anything like that. So, which is fine. But I would say, at least with this, if we're gonna do an actual sequel, going back to what I mentioned earlier with the CGI aspect of like what they did with the Resident Evil films and things like that. If you want, no, especially with the Evil Dead, you'll be able to get more of the graphics out of it, more of the brutality, but you can keep your original voice actor for your character. That's personally where I'm coming from. I don't really think this is going to be it doesn't work well as a reboot. I would personally say just keep this as a one-off sequel, because why can't the Deadites get other cities? And that's what we're getting obviously with this new film, Evil Dead Rise.
So are you one of those people that's like, if Bruce can't play it, no one should do it?
Not necessarily.
Because I've heard some people say that.
Not,
like, if Robert
not
can't be
necessarily.
Freddy, they shouldn't
Not
do it.
necessarily.
I
It's just
disagree with
there
you.
has to have a specific charisma with that character to bring
Well,
towards it.
sure, of course.
Well,
I mean,
then how-
there was with Bruce when he first started. Who's to say there's not another person? But yeah, you like your animated ideas as long as the original person does the voice.
I've seen them come out really, really well versus a live action. So that's just where I'm at.
So then how would you want to approach it from a tonal standpoint? Would it be veering back into the more humorless stuff of the original
No, I would actually
film
keep
and
it
the
back
remake, or
for it be the original Evil Dead. That tone, the darkness of
so
it.
much darker, not
Pretty
not
much
as
what
goofy
they
as what we
no,
did in the
I
television
like, and that's
series,
the
or-
other thing that I appreciated what they did with the 2013 remake is they kept away from the humor and they made it more the brutality of what the Deadites should have been. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the hell out of the other ones, the campy horror gore.
I think if you're going animated, you got to go the silly way. I don't think it's going to work nearly as well if you try and go the serious route.
60-40.
No one knows what that means when you say it, but okay.
7:30.
So yeah, I don't know. Personally, I think starting over with a new story. I mean, not use the Necronomicon, use Deadites, but I don't think we need the same old cabin with just a new Ash or new characters. I don't think a reboot, or I don't think a legacy sequel would. It's not possible with Ash anyway in a live action. So yeah, just give us a new Deadite story where the Necronomicon is somewhere else now. I mean, it was just in the cabin, so who's to say it wouldn't just
Well,
be
and
somewhere else?
that's what they're doing with this new one with Evil Dead Rise.
Oh, it's in the skyscraper?
Well, yeah, it's technically supposed to be set in LA in some, I believe, like an apartment building or something like that. So
Gotcha.
we'll see how that goes.
Fuego, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would dig to, like, Army of Darkness is my favorite of the entire series, and so I would like to see them with the Necronomicon, but in a different time period, maybe Old West that shit, or, maybe even Mobster it, I don't know, just something that like, I love medieval storytelling, and that's why I like that one so much, but just look into a different period of the past where, think of like bandits that go and they're like hidden in the cabin or something, or they, I don't know, just something different. I am curious what Rise is gonna be like,
you would
though.
retcon the ending of Army of Darkness. So basically, technically,
It depends which ending you're talking about. 'cause, there's two.
not the alternate and everything, but the original. So basically,
I slept too long.
yeah. So technically, the Necronomicon would still have been hidden in the castle ruins,
It would
and
be
that's
a
where
soft
that's where
medieval
Nobi
kind
and
of
them
thing.
found it, brought it back to the cabin, and it's just basically like that wheel of cough, you would
Have
call
some,
it.
yeah. Have some different backstory about it being able to get out of that area and to a different part of the world, even. And get it overseas, get it something. I don't know. We're just spitballing, right? So yeah.
Okay, so moving on to the second one, we're each going to do two, and then we'll pass it over to you guys for some opinions. The franchise that I would most want to reboot or do a sequel to outside of Nightmare on Elm Street is Tremors. I love the Tremors film so much. That first one from 1990 is just one of my favorite films, and I can answer this, but we almost got the answer a couple of years back when Kevin Bacon actually came back to do a pilot episode for a possible Tremors reboot series. They did the pilot, but the channel they pitched it to passed on it.
I think it was sci-fi, right?
Yeah, I think it was sci-fi. So that was a big bummer to a lot of people when they found out about it. So I would say that I don't think doing it as a legacy sequel would be such a bad idea. If we could get Val McKee back, then that would be great. But all I really want in a legacy sequel is I've had an idea for a while where if it just starts off with, you know, like the camera pans down and you see the desert, this guard tower with, you know, the two little barricade things that go up and down, and it just says, you know, Perfection, Nevada, and they basically blocked it off so no one can get there. And the very beginning of the movie, the guard is just there, you know, reading a magazine because no one ever comes or goes. And then it would be really cool if there was basically a graboid stampede underneath. So like he starts to feel the earth move and starts to see stuff, you know, shake, and then he sees like these trails in the dirt, one go right by his little shack, one go right by his little shack on this side, and then all of a sudden one goes underneath and he drops into the ground, into the tunnel that the graboid has made, and then he's like, what the heck? And then another one comes and just following the first one's path just gobbles him up on our way out of town. And so the graboids spread to the rest of the U.S., and then we can have fun wherever we want. I always thought of...
Oh, shit, I'd dig the hell out of that. God damn.
Did I never tell you that?
No. Of all the Tremors talk and everything, the stuff we had planned, I've never heard any of that. What the hell?
Like, I thought maybe a graboid in Vegas movie might be kind of fun. Just, you know, go back to some of the schlockier, you know, horror movie times. But, I mean... It's a desert. Vegas is a desert, so it would be fun to have a graboid pop up in one of the fancy hotels that keep a dirt area out in the, you know, for the guests and stuff like that. But yeah, so I would want to reboot Tremors. It doesn't have to be in perfection anymore. I would in fact want to see them leave, but I just think it would be a really fun thing to get back into. I've always loved the Tremors series, even the TV show. There's only like two of the movies are just awful, but
yeah. No, actually, I'm thinking the graboids at Coachella.
There you go.
Oh, imagine the field day that thing would have.
posters,
Oh
yeah,
man, that'd
yeah.
be great. Just get them out of here.
Yeah.
No, I would definitely agree. I think a legacy sequel for this would be the best, and we kind of did almost get that because with the pilot that we had for Tremors, technically that was supposed to be a semi-retcon after the second movie, so the third and on never happened. And Val was still technically in perfection. He never left, which I kind of would have liked to have seen that. Sadly, now we don't have Fred Ward and everything like that, which would have been really cool to have him come back as Earl. But no, I definitely feel like this one would be best suited for the Legacy sequel. And honestly, I like that idea of the graboids in Vegas.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Fuego?
You know, I would be okay with just kind of rebooting it, but keeping it within the same kind of context of the universe and stuff. I wouldn't need Val to come back as awesome as I think it would be. You know, it's a series that I felt like there's always been humor in the Tremors films, but I do feel like they got sillier as they went on into the later entries and stuff.
Yeah.
I would like to see them go significantly darker because some of the deaths in the very first film, like, you know, the older couple, the doctor and his wife and stuff, like that was some scary shit. And I feel like as stuff got goofier and sillier as the entries went on, like, I mean, maybe even go with an R rating and really, you know, get down and dirty with it and keep the humor to a little bit more of a minimalistic standpoint. And, you know, as I thought about it, I really liked the fourth movie, you know, where it was, you know, like the origins of perfection.
Oh yeah, the Western one was fun.
I would really like to see, and, you know, I guess I'm piggybacking on my last idea, but I would like to see in Tremors in a different era, whether it's like, I mean, jump into the future and make it like wacky sci-fi or something, or, you know, just go decades.
Tremors in
back
space.
into the past. There was always some way, man. You know, I mean, I'm suddenly thinking of Empire Strikes Back, where they're in the asteroid and like huge.
Well, considering
were they from space, like a dude?
No. They're from Earth. They're from Earth.
Let's go even further back into the origins.
But no, they just made me think like if they're going like it'd be like the seventh Tremors and everything, like Tremors in space, they're just like flying through space and like giant space worms.
Yeah.
God, it'd be ridiculous.
Well, I mean, I guess they could put they could put the ass blasters in space.
No,
They could
God.
put the,
Actually, wouldn't even have to be Vegas for a new movie. I mean, just a campground. You know, just any campground really. You can come up through the trees and the soil and all that good stuff. So, yeah, Tremors was mine. So, Robert,
Tremors
what is your
in the
second
Grand
one?
Canyon.
Yep.
There you go. All right, so my next one is actually gonna.
Not a lot of victims there, but sure.
Well, you know, depending on the time of the year, you know. My next one is actually going to be Pumpkinhead. So this one is a series that does not get enough love that it deserves, especially on the practical effects wise.
oh yeah.
We've only had 4 movies, but the one thing I've always appreciated is the practical effects of the monster has never changed. it's maybe they've upped a little detail.
Well,
and
they added
everything.
wings.
Well, oh yeah, well the fourth one, Blood Wings, or whatever. Yeah, that doesn't really count. Whatever.
Just saying.
Whatever. That's a minute little detail. Although with that one, I would say I would go for a reboot on this one. Just especially because, again, going back to our effects are a lot better than what they used to be. Our animatronics are far superior than what they used to be, but I would still say keep your guy in the suit, but keep everything practical. Don't overdo it with the CGI, which a lot of times they do nowadays. Just keep it as your enhancements. You don't have to have, obviously, Lance Henriksen back. Just do a full reboot and everything like that, even change up the story. But I would say give a little bit more backstory to the Witch in the Woods, and even with like the comic stuff that's out there, there's the other demons from the other witches that we could explore into as well.
Yeah, that's what Mahal was talking about. I
Mm-hmm.
remember.
Yeah, technically they've done 2 comic series. One of them, they introduced the idea that Pumpkinhead is just the demon of vengeance, and there are demons for every sin of man. And so there were a bunch of witches that each one was assigned a demon to guard. And in the story, it was actually kind of interesting. All the other demons hate Pumpkinhead because he gets called to Earth so often compared to them. And so they're actually called on to try and take Pumpkinhead out in the series. It was a pretty cool little 5-issue series. It was from like 2012 or something like that.
Something like that.
But I think rebooting it would be good. I think keeping it practical is key. Do not go CG with Pumpkinhead. However, what I would love to see is give me I was going to say Tim Burton, but I guess I can just as easily say the Guillermo del Toro version of it.
Oh,
They
yeah.
really,
Throw all the money at it.
like really get into the Witch Haggis's area of the woods and like the pumpkin head, the patch that you got to climb up to get the pumpkin head baby going and stuff like that. Like, if you get the right visual director in there to do this, it could be really a wild time. And honestly, I don't see a reason why this couldn't be a version of an A24 movie too, or again, it's more slashery, but having that sort of stylization, I think, would fit Pumpkinhead personally.
Yeah,
Well, especially for his hunting scenes as he's going over after the people, those I think would work out especially well. Hell, honestly, even with James Wan, I think would do a really good job with this as rebooting this.
Yeah.
Just on a
Because the
stylistic
Comic Robot
aspect.
company was doing it, or that
Something like-
whatever it
yeah.
is, his company. Yeah, I think going the more sophisticated route would be cool, as opposed to. I mean, the first film wasn't that schlocky, but I don't think I've seen past the second one. I know there's a bunch that they released direct to video.
All right.
So reboot I think is fine, and practicality is key. Stan Winston did such a great job. I think he directed that first one, like it was his directorial debut, if I remember. But yeah, keep the serious tone and explore some backstory and whatnot. I think this might actually serve itself better as a series if you could, and if you could explore some of those other, like I was unaware about the comic just expansion on all of that stuff. I think that could be really rad. But yeah, this is a franchise very similar to what Robert said about Phantasm, where I'm not as well versed, within it. I haven't read any of those comics, and I don't even remember much beyond the first one with Lance. So.
Given the idea, this would actually lend itself very well to like an HBO anthology too, where every episode is a new person that's been wronged that seeks out vengeance via Pumpkinhead. I think that you could do very well with like a 5 or 6 episode series of that.
Yeah, totally, and have it be like a little differentiation morality tale for every single one, different set of characters. Yeah, that could work very well.
Yeah, and like with that, especially being the anthology, again, you don't have to bring back Lance like they did with the other 4 movies, because basically they just brought him back as a ghost. And didn't really serve anything, even though, because again, he's not technically, he is tied, but he's not technically tied to Pumpkinhead anymore. They're already dead.
Fuego, what is your second franchise that you would reboot or legacy sequelize?
Well, that's the thing. So they have already remade this, and they still continue sequelizing it. It's definitely one of Full Moon's most popular franchises. I have such an affinity for Puppet Master, but I will admit I haven't really liked any of the films since. 4 and 5 are okay, when bad puppets go good and all that stuff. But I don't know if they've made a good one since the third, where they went to and explored where they kind of retconned Toulon's backstory. Because if you've seen the second film where he's resurrected and straight up evil and all of that, but I did like Littlest Reich, the remake. So I mean, in this particular territory, I would be fine with another comedically grisly take that like they did with Littlest Reich, and if they want to, you know, be in that sort of playground. But I'm just sick of the Nazi stuff, and it's the most prevalent storytelling that they've gone with, whether, you know, whether it was the third film or whether it was the Axis trilogy or, you know, the Blade with his solo movie they did recently. Just don't want to see any more Nazi stuff with the puppets, and I want to see the puppets evil again. I want to see them not just killing bad guys. That's what made the first and especially the second, which I think is the strongest film, where they introduced Torch and, you know, did all kinds of other craziness, had some of the coolest kills. I liked when the puppets were not, when they weren't trying to sell toys and turn them good, like in 4 and 5 and whatnot. And
That's why Legacy.
Demonic Toys versus Puppet Master?
I
that
thought
too, man. That
was
like
horrible.
Corey Feldman. Ugh.
I thought Littlest Reich was good. It did all that.
Yeah,
it did
I liked
everything
it.
we asked for.
Yeah, and it had some of the gnarliest kills of like anything in the franchise. The pregnant woman, horrible.
Yeah, I haven't watched that one.
Yeah, it's it brings the gore for sure. But you know, that wasn't produced with Full Moon. That was its own separate thing. It was kind of like a soft reboot, I guess you could say. But yeah, just no more Nazis with the puppets, man, and make them evil. Have them just be the vicious killers that they were in those first two films. That's what I want. What do you guys think about the franchise and how they should approach?
Well, that's where I would say Puppet Master would serve well as a just the straight remake. Again, I've seen maybe like the first 3 or 4. I haven't really seen anything else past those, but I want to see our puppets evil again. That was the fun part. Like you had little toys just running around and everything, just hacking people up. It was fun. I agree with you, Fuego. I didn't really care for when they flipped everything around and made them basically good guys / anti-heroes.
Yeah.
I wasn't about that, but I would.
Yeah, when they were going after the totems and doing all
Exactly.
that stuff in 4 and 5. Didn't like it.
Yeah, and like things like that. But I would definitely say put this as a remake, especially just because our technology nowadays, it make it so much better. It wouldn't be as campy, I would say.
I don't know about that, because they would not be able to like keep themselves from using CG for it, and they'd all look like just little CG things running around all the time. I don't know. I would hope they'd try and do practical like a lot of the original was, but I don't know. I've never been the biggest fan of the Puppet Master franchise, so at this point my answer would be don't care.
Don't even bother.
But I guess if I had to, I would say reboot, because they've fucked with the lore and the characters for so long with all those different movies that doing a legacy sequel at this point, I mean, the last legacy sequel they did was like 2-3 years ago, so it's not really anything new. And again, Littlest Reich, which was basically a reboot, I thought they did a great job with that, and that's definitely more in line of what I want from a Puppet Master movie. So yeah, I mean, I would say let's just reboot it, personally.
Cool. Yeah, it's a franchise near and dear to my heart. I still have all the toys and whatnot. So Full Moon, Charles Band, they've got lots of money, you know, since my childhood.
So we're just over halfway here, and we've covered the 2 franchises each we wanted to. Do you guys have any thoughts on, you know, the glut of reboots versus and now legacy sequels, and are they a good idea? Are they a bad idea? Should we get away from it entirely? Anyone have any thoughts on any of that? Just a bunch of shy people in the house. Okay. Yes, please.
Yeah.
I just really like, I mean, in general, like the origin stories and the prequels, like, you know, many of the horror series.
That is a good way to re-enter some series that we don't get a lot of, that we haven't gotten entries into in a while. Yeah, go back and tell an earlier story that we haven't heard
I
before.
really favor those in general.
That's a good call. That's a good call.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's at least expanding and doing something different in that regard, I would say.
And if you do it right, you can, you know, lay some Easter eggs that are like, that lead into stuff that are going to happen in the franchise later on, you know. Anyone else? All right, fair enough.
Well, I don't think we should be
Yes.
opposed to.
Well,
Oh, did someone? Oh, yes.
I was wondering, so we got a Reanimator reboot kind of in 2018, and then we also got like a little hint of Herbert West. I don't know if it was a reboot. It was at the end of the Castle Freak remake.
Oh, that's right.
oh yeah.
Any thoughts?
I know he's a big Reanimator
I
fan.
love Reanimator. I'm a huge H.P. Lovecraft fan, and I am giddy as hell to meet Jeffrey Combs in
Yeah,
July
Mad-
at Mad Monster.
Monster.
Like, I love the hell out of that man. This, if anything, I would say do the legacy sequel kind of thing, because at this point, it's, man, I just love Jeffrey Combs as Herbert West. Granted, he's so far removed from what the character actually was in the original story. He brought a new personality to Herbert West. He made him a lot more likable, even though he was a despicable person.
I think the way you'd have to do it is he's doing an experiment at the beginning of the movie, you know, causing more people to come back, and like the cops burst in and shoot him down. And like he has a lab assistant that like takes over or something.
Well,
like
that's kind of what they ended up doing with the third one.
Oh, okay.
Because after Bride of Reanimator,
What,
and
Legacy of Reanimator? Was that the third one? Or was it?
Beyond Reanimator, yeah. He's technically in jail, and it's like a witness kid from earlier in the day finds one of his vials and becomes a lawyer and represents him later on, blah, blah.
Gotcha.
But they were actually supposed to make the fourth one where Wes is still in prison, but the president dies. So they get him out to basically revive the president. And
Jesus.
yeah, I mean to say that one never happened. That, I think, would have fallen really flat on his face.
So if I remember correctly, was there a Reanimator crossover with Army of Darkness?
Yes.
I think
There's actually been, so there was a 4-issue Army of Darkness Reanimator book, and then there was a one-shot special later on, and then Reanimator had its own set of comics as well. So there's a lot more Reanimator content out there for sure. But yeah, I'd be interested to see more. It was always a fun, campy kind of idea.
I just want to say real quick though that I'm never really opposed to reboots and remakes of these popular IPs. Now, granted, we still need original ideas, and it's something people complain about constantly. Oh, there's no original stuff out there. Some of my favorite movies this year, X, Everything Everywhere All at Once, some of the, like the weirder genre-centric stuff I've seen, totally original ideas. You know, they're their own thing. Even they were paying homage to certain stuff that's in like the public, you know, kind of consciousness and the zeitgeist and whatnot. So, I mean, some of the greatest horror films of all time, most notably in the 80s, were remakes. The Fly, The Blob, The Thing. So I'm not opposed to, if you're far enough removed, it's not like, oh, that film is so sacred, like don't touch it. I mean, it's not going to take the original film away. It's still going to be there. It's still residing. It's not going anywhere. And so I'm never opposed to a reimagination. You know, my Stephen King talk is that it's another turn of the wheel. It's just, hey, it's not going to be the same as the original, and perhaps you could do something not necessarily improving, but something that's different and distinctive in its own right. So
Yeah, that's the way I always say it when people are like, oh, they should just stop doing sequels and come up with original ideas. Like, they need to stop with Texas Chainsaw or Nightmare on Elm Street. And it's like, my thought is, I'd rather them make another one, because then there's a chance that it's good enough where I want to rewatch it over and over again like the rest of them. Whereas if they don't make it, there's no chance at all that that'll
We'll
happen.
take the was it 2003 remake of Texas Chainsaw.
Yeah,
That was a great remake.
all the time. Yeah, agreed. So it's not like Fuego said, they're not printing these movies on your old DVDs. So it's like you can still watch all these old things. That's like the biggest pet peeve of mine, or one of the big pet peeves of mine that's come from seemingly from geek culture, is it ruined my childhood. It's like, fucking, no, it didn't. Like, a new Star Wars movie did not ruin Star Wars for you. Like, you may not like it, but all your love for the old ones is still probably there. Like, so I've never bought into that ruin my childhood crap. So, but that's part of why we wanted to have this discussion, you know? Legacy sequel, reboot, is one really worse than the other? I mean, it feels like the studio's gonna do whatever they feel like is gonna make them the most money at the time. In the 2000s, that was reboots. In the, 20 teens, that was legacy sequels. So we'll see how the trend goes from here. I mean, now we're getting TV shows for Chucky, and we're gonna get a Hellraiser TV show later, either next year or later this year.
The film
think
is
it's
this fall.
film
the
is
David
this year,
Bruckner
so the
film,
TV
which
show
is a
will probably be
remake.
next year.
Yeah, speaking of remakes, we have David Bruckner, the guy who did the Night House, remaking Hellraiser with a much more hellbound heart novella specific.
Yeah,
androgynous
the
sort
new
of
movie is
pinheads.
definitely a lot closer to the original source material that Clive had presented originally.
Yeah.
which
I'm all
I'm
for it, man.
excited for.
Yeah.
And
same.
again, when you consider, it's not like it used to be where it seems like it's just soulless studio cash grabs. I mean, there's actual filmmakers out there that grew up loving this stuff that are now eager to get a chance to show what they can do with said franchises. So I'm excited about the idea of extra entries into our favorite franchises. One of the ones that I wanted to throw out there, just because we're kind of coming to the end of the content here for you guys, I always wanted to see more Critters. And I think they
tried.
fucked up so bad with A New Binge and Critters Attack that I wish that needs to be rebooted entirely. Like we don't need any of the stuff we've seen before. I still like the idea of these little, flesh-eating krites that are completely out of control with a slight bit of funny edge to them. But yeah, I don't think we've gotten nearly enough Critters material. But I'm a big creature fan, so I tend towards any creature movie. Any others that you guys would want to?
Well, I mean, speaking of kind of cousins of critters, you know, I still want a third Gremlins. They've been trying to make it for so damn long. I've talked with Zach Galligan a few different times about it, and he's like, and scripts have been, you know, around and revised and over. We do have that Secrets of the Mogwai prequel animated series coming to HBO Max later this year, which I'm excited about. But yeah, a third proper sequel. I don't think you need to necessarily reboot Gremlins. I think that is one where you would definitely
Legacy sequel would be fine
do a
for that,
legacy
yeah.
sequel, and you can do it well. I mean, bring back Phoebe or Kate's. I mean, no, you don't think so?
No, I just love that you call her Phoebe.
Is it Phoebe? Is it like, I don't know, dude.
Dude, she was my favorite friend
Tomato,
too.
tomato.
Phoebe was awesome. Phoebe, Ross, Rachel, it was fantastic.
Okay, so
That how you doing,
enlighten me,
guy?
sir, what is the proper pronunciation? Because I want to know.
But well,
Wait, for
so
what?
What's the proper pronunciation of
Phoebe,
that?
Phoebe Cates.
Phoebe.
Okay,
It's
I
Phoebe
don't know.
Cates, yeah.
Hey, you learn something new every day, hopefully, if you give yourself open to it. But,
Any other franchises that you'd want to touch, Robert?
Not really, honestly. Oh,
Great for the discussion.
Yeah,
Fuego?
subspecies actually would be a cool one. I'd like to see them remake.
More Full Moon.
Yeah.
yeah, well, I mean,
Full Moon has-
that and the Vampire Journals, which was
Yep.
also tied in with that mythology, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
But no, subspecies would be cool, especially with the, again, just we could expand more on the family lore of Radu, and then I can't remember his father's name, but he was played by Angus Scrimm back in the day. Yep.
In vampire makeup? I don't remember Angus. Did he have like the long fingers like Radu also?
No, he was in
Oh.
like a white powder wig and like basically like white makeup on his face.
Radu got his mom's fingers?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, he looks a lot more like his mom.
I was going to say, it's
It's a
almost
little
like
rough,
the hot
you
dog
know.
fingers and everything.
I wonder how few people in this room even know who Radu in the subspecies movies are. So, okay, well,
Well, I mean, I was gonna say like another one they've been trying to do that Lost Boys prequel for the longest time. They had it in development at the CW. They wanted to explore vampire. Like each season was gonna be the 60s and the vampiric activity there, and then they were gonna do a second season in the 70s, almost like American Horror Story. That shit a little bit.
that was some
It never ended up coming
reaching
to
for the
fruition, but I thought
stars.
it was
I mean, Jesus.
Yeah,
There's no way that was
and,
gonna fly.
and I feel like if they would
And
do
they were trying to
that,
do the Lost Girls at one point too. where
yeah,
it was
if
all
they
female vampires.
if they end up doing that, I feel like they would just make it too like pre-teeny, like what they're doing with the Winchesters prequel.
Don't get me
Like,
started on
yeah,
that,
like the
man.
new Supernatural prequel for like Winchesters, it looks
okay.
way too pre-teeny.
It's a thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so
yeah,
it's
it
so
just got ordered to series. Yeah.
so basically they're
First trailer came out.
they're
like
kind
a
of
week ago.
retconning.
They're retconning some mythology.
Yeah, so between like Mary and John, they're changing stuff around. I'm not too happy with it.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
It didn't ruin your childhood, Robert. You
Fuck
still like the
no.
old
Fuck
series.
no. That's 15 years. I loved watching that show.
Yeah, no, we still get
From
hits
day
on
one
those-
to the very
on
last
us
episode, and
crying
I
in the
cried
last
my eyes
episode,
out.
those reactions we did.
Yeah, that's right. That reaction's been watched, I think, 100,000 times now.
Something like that, yeah. Well, you can see them bawling like babies on that.
Yeah.
I wasn't on that one.
Yeah.
I still cried though. I'm not gonna bullshit on that.
So, last thing, I mean, I'll toss it out one more time. Does anyone have any series they'd like to see come back in some way, shape, or form besides what we've talked about? Yes.
What are your thoughts on what they've done with the Saw series?
Interesting question.
Yeah.
Okay, because now it feels like even those people are rubber banding, right? Because they were like, we're gonna do Spiral. This isn't your daddy's Saw movie, you know? It's
Right,
like
the book of
we're
Saw.
naming it something else, and then it's like, no, it's just
The same.
Saw light. Like that's all it felt like to me. And Chris Rock was really trying hard.
It was an uneven performance from him in my estimation.
Yeah,
You know? Yeah.
I'm trying my hardest not to make a Saw Will Smith joke right now, but.
Oh boy.
But now, right, the rumor is for the next one, for Saw 10, that they're going to go back to John Kramer
Yeah,
again.
they're gonna bring Tobin Bell.
And like so they're abandoning the Spiral stuff and going back to the Tobin Bell of it all. And it's like, well, we've already done that a few times. How are you going to do that without just going back and doing the straight prequel movie? I don't think they're going to do that. So that to me feels like copping out. It's like, well, we tried this way, so it didn't work, so now we're going to go back to the other way, which is, again, it's what studios are going to do, but it's unfortunate. It's like, go with something and stick with it, and either be completely successful or fail gloriously like the Star Wars sequel trilogy.
Yeah. Well, there's so many people who don't want to die in those hills, man. And that's why we have the retconning like we did. Like, okay, there was H2O, and they're like, no, let's retcon H2O, and let's
Make Jamie Lee way less
let's
interesting.
do the 2018 version instead, and it does feel like kind of a cop out in some ways.
Yeah.
Well, hell, they did that a few times between like H2O, Resurrection, and things like they kept changing up those characters. They didn't know what the hell they wanted to do.
Yeah, I quit on Saw after the third film, and I
Same.
was just like not as into it. But then when Spiral was coming out, I watched every entry, and I fell in love with that franchise, man. I feel like just the whole inner workings and the time jumping that became so prevalent. I think you can do another sequel proper and bring back Tobin and tell some very interesting stories and fill in some more of those proverbial little gaps or make other little spider webby interconnections.
I'd rather see a new Cube movie before I want to see a
Well,
new
they're trying to
Saw
remake Cube right now. Lionsgate is
Cube, I
taking
mean,
a pitch
that
ideas
was
right now.
proto Saw, honestly,
Yeah.
and I loved that. If you like the Cube movies and you haven't seen Meander from last year, I think it's a French movie that's on Prime, Amazon Prime right now.
Yeah, it's on Netflix.
A woman wakes up in a metal tube and is only able
that
to
damn
move
movie.
forward
Yeah.
through the
Yeah.
tubes,
Trying to
and
get
each
to her
tube
daughter. Yeah.
has a different thing to get through. One of them opens up to like coals and lava kind of shit, and like she has to try and get out and find out why she's even there to begin with. So if you like Cube, if you like Saw kind of stuff, definitely watch Meander, because it's one that had me like I literally teared up at the end, because they hit you with such a switch punch at the end that you're just like, Jesus, this was a good movie. So yeah, Meander.
It's a good little
definitely look into
claustrophobic escape room.
that. It's on Amazon Prime right now. So
Yeah, and then, since I have to get my Stephen King plug in there, we just had a remake of Firestarter, and it was very lackluster. I was not very impressed with it, unfortunately. I actually think I like the Sci-Fi Channel rekindled sequel they did with Malcolm McDowell and Marguerite Moreau, I think her name is.
Oh,
from
yeah,
the
I
Mighty
forgot about
Ducks and
that
stuff.
one.
I thought that was more entertaining. So, sometimes the reboot approach does not necessarily work, and sometimes you should have just, seen an even older version of Charlie, maybe. Maybe she's a mom now herself, and I think a third Firestarter could have been better than an additional remake, or just like a legacy sequel. Bring Drew back, why the hell not? But we do have a Stephen King remake of Salem's Lot coming in September, and it's produced by James Wan. September 9th, I think, is when it hits theaters. So it's the first time it's being adapted not as a miniseries like you had the 2004 with Rob Lowe. Obviously, the one Tobe Hooper did in the 70s, I still have a major affinity for, but I'm curious what a full R-rated theatrical experience produced by Wan could actually be like. But then again, fingers firmly crossed, because we've seen with some of these remakes, they come out kind of lackluster.
and
You
that's
have to condense so much material, especially.
Yeah, and that's always the problem with the Stephen King stuff, especially his like massive books between it and even Salem's Lot like this. There's going to be a lot of stuff that they're going to have to cut out.
That's why the miniseries approach for King, I think, works better unless
Oh,
you're
absolutely.
taking a short story and you can adapt and expand upon the source material in comparison.
Yep.
So,
last question I'll throw out to the room and to you guys as well. Is there any property that you think legitimately should not ever get a reboot?
it's a good one.
I guess you could say, or a sequel at this point either. There's one property in my mind that I think people would say, I personally disagree, but I think a lot of people would say Jaws should never be remade. I disagree. I think eventually it should. I think I love The Shallows almost as much as I love Jaws, because they got the effects right and they got a cool shark story that wasn't Jaws, that did a really good job. But I know a lot of people would say Jaws should not be touched. Is there anyone that thinks there's any property that should not be touched?
Everybody talks about The Exorcist. They talk about a lot of that 60s and 70s stuff, Rosemary's Baby, some of those iconic bits. Honestly, I'm going to die on that hill, like I said earlier. I don't think anything is that sacred.
I agree.
I'm always up for a new, especially if it's an exciting, creative person that already has a little bit of a track record. But then again, I fell for that with Firestarter, because The Vigil was the shit, and then the Blumhouse Firestarter from that same director was not.
Was
So-
shit.
What would you guys take? So we've all gone through the Howling stuff. Would you consider would that series be worthy of a reboot?
I think I think a series that has such a fucking downslope
Massive
as
drop-off from the
Howling
first
does
one?
absolutely deserves a new movie.
Yeah. So would you? So would you
they need to
basically
fix the series
So
at
would
this
you
point.
leave the first one alone and basically start off in like bookwise on like say movie 2 and just redo and revamp that story from there.
No, because it's from 1980 or whatever. So I think doing a new version now. It's been over 40 years.
I
Yeah,
think
let's
Dee
do a
would
new.
Dee would be down to come back for another Halloween movie.
No,
Reboot.
no,
I
no,
think
no,
reboot.
no.
Yeah?
Reboot it. Tell that first story again. Do it with today's effects, but still
Keep
get
it practical. Well, now that Baker's, basically free, he can come back and actually finish those graphics that he was doing on that.
I think it's a no-brainer if a film series has gone downhill like that to do a reboot. But
Well, as drastically as it
well,
did.
I was referring more to what people consider like these holy grails that should never be touched.
I mean, some people.
Some people kind of talk about like the Howling on that, like as one of
I've
those
never
top
heard
ones.
anyone
At least
call
the
The Howling
the
holy
first
grail.
movie. I'm not talking about the other ones.
I'm just
not
saying.
talking about the other ones. I'm talking about the first one.
I don't hear a lot of people that are like, Jaws, Schindler's List, The Howling. Like it's not
Schindler's List.
as like benchmark, movies. Like that's what I was talking about. Iconic, kind of.
Have fucking Liam Neeson come back.
I would be more like into a side tale if we're talking werewolves. Like, give me American Werewolf in Stockholm, or
Give me a new
Madrid.
Silver
Let's just do
Bullet.
a different city in Europe.
Give me a new Silver Bullet.
I would be very down for a remake of Silver Bullet. Don Coscarelli, the Phantasm director, was originally set to be behind the lens for that, and he left over creative differences. So that was one that it's got a very minimal amount of source material. It's a very short novella. You can read it in about an hour or so. And
Yep.
I mean, King hasn't really done anything else werewolfy. So yeah, I'd be all for that.
All right, guys.
Right.
Well, I think that's as good a place to call it as any. Thank you all very much for hanging with us today. We greatly
Yes.
appreciate
Much
it.
appreciated, guys.
Feel free to check us out on YouTube if you haven't yet, the Horror Show channel on YouTube. But thank you to everyone that's been watching. Thank you to all of our patrons. If you guys are curious, this will be up on our channel after the fact, as well as our previous panel from Friday, which our lovely attendees are here as well today.
These two beautiful ladies are here.
And that panel was all about who is the modern master of horror. So like the last 50 years or so, Clive Barker or Stephen King. And we talked a little bit in a cross-examination of, King being primarily a writer and only having directed one film, and the fact that Barker having directed multiple films, and he's a playwright and he's designed toys and video games, and so just comparing the aspect of their talents and who's darker and so on. So yeah, it was fun.
But yeah, we've got over 3,000 or almost 4,000 episodes on the channel. 300 of his Hail to Stephen King. So thank you guys very much for hanging out. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you to all of our patrons for supporting the channel the way that you do. But until next time, I've been Cecil Laird.
Robert the Wolfman.
And remember, stay scared, guys. Thank you all very much.